Litigation Psychology Podcast brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. I'm Dr. Bill Kanasky, and with us today, a trial attorney, Kurt Spengler, here in Orlando, right down the street from me. Kurt, how you doing?
Doing well. How's it going with you?
Well, as you can see, thankfully the weather's beautiful here. So if the price I have to pay is sitting on the back porch every day talking to talented people like you, I'll take it for another month. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Kurt, tell me a little bit about your professional background and where your area of practice is.
Okay, I've been an attorney in Orlando for a little over 30 years, always doing defensive civil litigation cases, wide variety of cases. I actually am an attorney for Walt Disney World quite a bit in their premises liability cases. In my past, I did some med mal cases. I still do a little bit of that, but which is good in the personal injury cases because it gives us a stronger base of knowledge about medicine than maybe some attorneys. And then in probably the past 10 years, I've done a significant amount of transportation cases, trucking cases. I'm the head of our Wicker Smith's entire firm transportation practice group and member of TIDA, and I've handled hundreds and hundreds of trucking cases. My office looks out over I-4, and so I always can look out the window and see clients' trucks go by all the time. So it's a little bit of our Jacksonville office looks at the St. Johns River. Our West Palm office looks at the intercoastal and the ocean, and Tampa looks at the bay. I get to look at I-4, but.
Which, by the way, an I-4 that's been under construction for,
right.
50 years now? Well, thanks for that, just a recap about your background. I want to jump around a little bit. I was doing a podcast with actually an in-house claims adjuster in the trucking industry. And the question came up of, technologies evolved so much in the trucking and transportation industry, but it's been kind of a double-edged sword. What's your opinion of whether it be GPS or the in-cab, video cameras? Is it a good or a bad thing, or a little bit of both when it comes to putting on a case in front of you?
So there's different aspects of it. I guess some of it is to monitor driver behavior and safety, and obviously anything that's safer is better. I don't know that it always necessarily pans out to be safer, but from an attorney's perspective, definitely a double-edged sword. I've had drive cam cases, and you're getting more and more drive cam where the driver may tell one story and then the drive cam tells another. Other times it's actually exculpatory. I've had cases where we actually thought it was like setups where someone's pretty much slamming on their brakes on the expressway for no apparent reason, and then they get rear-ended. And so it is a double-edged sword. And then you have the inward-facing camera, which and that's controversial because some people think it's an invasion of privacy, or there's discussion whether or not it really makes a difference, or the drivers may the first couple of weeks it's in the truck, it may alter their behavior, but after a little while, out of sight, out of mind, and they're back to whatever they're doing. But I've had some cases where the outward facing camera looked great, but then it just so happens you see the inward, the guy was glancing down at something or tapping a cigarette out the window or something. So there's always something but at least I think that at least what you're dealing with at the time. So that's some of the main technologies. You got the cameras, you got the GPS. Obviously you got the ECMs where you can, when an accident happened, it's recorded, and you can, get lots of data, speed at the time of impact, how long they started braking beforehand, and you can go back quite far and see, what was their behavior. And so if it shows, that you weren't going over the speed limit, that you started braking at a reasonable point in time, these types of things can be helpful. Again, it is a double-edged sword sometimes.
Case by case basis, right?
If you get one where it's like, okay, we started braking a half a second before we impacted that car and we were going 40 miles an hour, that's probably a case you're going to be settling.
So we've all heard about the problem of nuclear verdicts, particularly over the last few years. Why has the nuclear verdict phenomenon really just hammered the transportation and trucking industry? It seems to be disproportional relative to other industries. What are some of your hypotheses on why that's the case? One of mine, which is funny, I was driving down I-4. I took my family to the beach yesterday because the beach opened up over on New Smyrna. And I swear every third or fourth billboard was a plaintiff attorney billboard. The amount of aggressive advertising they have, particularly for the trucking industry, I find very interesting. What are some of your thoughts?
And that's an interesting point. I don't know, and if do the dollar figures that they're putting up there have any influence on what people think cases are? Of course, the dollar figures you see, I mean, and I've been to quite a few seminars, trucking seminars, where we're talking about this subject, obviously. And I mean, there's like $100 million verdicts, 50, yeah. 60, 70. I mean, these are not, a $3 million verdict. These are huge verdicts in trucking cases, and not always catastrophic. I mean, I've heard of ones where someone's getting a neck fusion and they're getting 20, 30 million. It's, I don't, I don't know the reason, but obviously, the economy's been very good up until the recent months. There's a lot of trucks on the road. I think everyone's probably had some type of negative experience near a truck or truck driver, and so they come in probably with that experience. And then I think we were talking beforehand, obviously you have the reptile issue, and there's a million different safety issues, and no matter what you're doing as a trucking company, the claim is you could always do better. Shouldn't it be safer? And so, there's a tug of war over, getting the freight moved and doing it as safe as possible. And so I think, that the reptile in that scenario where everyone can relate to, I've been on the road near a truck, that may have something to do with it. But it's definitely been a significant problem. Particularly in the trucking industry, although other industries to a lesser degree.
Sure. Do you find that, what are your experiences with, and maybe your evaluation of how the trucking industry has been communicating with both defense counsel, with each other, to try to maybe get on the same page for once, to try to maybe develop something new to decrease the amount of these nuclear verdicts? Because the one thing and it's been a criticism of the defense bar for a long time across all industries, is that defense attorneys and companies don't talk enough. They don't communicate ideas. Unlike the plaintiffs bar, they tell each other everything. Do you think the industry's response has been appropriate, or do you think more can be done?
Well, I mean, I think this has gotten people's attention, and I do go to quite a few trucking law seminars where we have some of the leaders from some of the biggest trucking companies in the country that we discuss these issues and how things how you can improve the perception for jurors. But then and my impression is that most of these companies are genuinely concerned about safety and making the truck safer, but you got to get the message out somehow to the community.
Yeah.
And there has been some also, but from trying cases standpoint, there has been also, efforts to combat the reptile theory. And there's been some good, rulings from judges not allowing that type of, strategy in court. I think you have to, voir dire is going to be huge in any of those cases where you got to, help people understand. I always like to try to say, like if you're talking about, well, wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't it be safer to do this? Wouldn't it be safer to do that? You always, and that's what the kind of the reptile theory is wouldn't it always be safer to do something a certain way? Well, you could always do something safer. And I always say, well, it would be safer if we made it, 10 miles an hour on I-4, and that way no one would ever get in a high-speed accident, but it wouldn't be practical or reasonable.
Sure.
And so you could always do something safer, or, if Disney World wanted to wrap everyone in bubble wrap before they came in the park or something, but you can't and so you have to kind of get that understanding to the jury in advance that you're going to hear this about, it's always, it needs to be safer, but let's talk about, the real world here and the concept of being reasonable.
Absolutely. I apologize for the background noise. My neighbor's like blowing leaves across the way. COVID-19. So this has been something no one's ever been through before, and everybody has kind of predictions on how it's going to influence jury decision making, particularly in transportation. Now, transportation has got, maybe for the first time in, I don't know, you're 30 years. And by the way, you don't even look like you're 35 years old. So I don't know if I'm buying that 30-year experience. You look
for some reason my hair is not falling out and it's not changed colors on me. I don't know what, it's just good genes or something, but
but it's been the best public relations message we've seen in some time. And you have a lot of talk, particularly in the media, about, truck drivers are heroes. Look at all the important things the industry is doing right now. What can the industry do to try to get that to translate into jury decision making? Now, I've talked to 100 people about this. 100 people think, no, it's, jurors are what have you done for me lately? They have short memories. Others are like, well, no, if we play our cards right, maybe we can get a more positive message like the healthcare folks have done. Where do you maybe see this going from an industry point of view?
Yeah, again, I think maybe for a year afterwards, we might be in good stead. But, a few years down the road, it'll be, probably back to normal. But yeah, since we represent healthcare providers and truck drivers right now, I'm kind of interested to see how the jurors are going to be treating them, once we do get some jury trials. But I think, again, it would be talking to jurors in voir dire. And I'm sure the plaintiff's lawyers are going to be wanting to talk to them about that too. I don't know what the trucking industry can really do to publicize what they've done, as far as, that, they were continuing to roll and continuing to deliver the groceries and everything we needed to keep this country going during COVID. But I mean, to the extent that they can do any kind of public service spots or something like that, that would be great. But it seems like it should have a favorable impact on jury verdicts. And I think, if you're trying a case, I actually have some clients that have, garbage truck and recycling truck companies. And, does everyone out there like to have their garbage picked up? Everybody does. Nobody, could you imagine what would happen if we didn't have garbage truck drivers? Now, how many of you out there actually wanted to be a garbage truck driver, and no one's going to raise their hand. And so, you could maybe, get them to think about, hey, these guys, they're people too, first of all, and they're doing a tough job. We don't, we shouldn't be holding them to some higher standard than they ought to be held to.
Very interesting. Two more questions for you. First of all, how have you and your firm been internally communicating about how to deal with the reptile tactics? And are these tactics something that you've been able to convey the danger of to your clients? Meaning, have your clients finally figured out, hey, we may need to put some more resources and more time and effort into our cases because I don't want to get reptiled by the company down the street?
Yeah, so obviously this has been a pretty hot topic for the last 4 or 5 years. We, in cases where we think that's going to happen, and trucking is, is particularly susceptible to it. But we try to file motions in limine, and there's a fair, like I said, there's some decent orders coming out from some judges that will not allow that because there's one we just saw recently where they said you can't use the term safety rule because there's really no such thing. It's nebulous. It's you have to.
There has been.
And so. And then obviously in the preparation of the witnesses, that's obviously a big thing is to get them ready for those types of questions and not to just, as we all know, it sounds perfectly, reasonable to say, wouldn't you agree that you always want to make things as safe as possible? Or, and then you get them to be trained to say, no, I think we need to be reasonable in our and be reasonably safe. And so, but I mean, motions in limine and preparing the witnesses, and then again, talking to people through the jury selection process. Those are probably the three main things. But I think most risk managers and insurance folks are pretty aware of it now. And
I would hope so.
I haven't really been seeing it as much as I used to recently. I don't know if it just been the luck of the draw, the cases I've had, or what, but I haven't seen it as much.
Well, thank you for your opinions on that. Finally, is that a little Gator football helmet behind you up there on the top of your shelf?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I got,
okay. So what is your prediction? Because, here in the state of Florida, no one watches professional sports because all the teams stink.
Right.
Everybody's into, and it's like a bloodbath down here in the state of Florida. What is your prediction on what the SEC, but also I guess just the NCAA, have you been hearing anything about, is college football going forward? Because if we don't get some football here soon, people may go insane.
No, it's driving me crazy. I watched an old game.
We all have.
Florida State game that I knew Florida had won. So I watched it, a few weeks ago. But I thought for sure by September we would be back at it and playing football. But I don't know if that's going to be the case. And then, will the players be prepared? It's hard to say. And I'm hopeful that we'll be sitting in stadiums in September, but I have no idea. Now the Bucks, apparently people are going to want to go see them this year if they're playing. But
well, that's because Mr. Brady has arrived in town, and a lot of excitement in Tampa. Well, Kurt, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Please keep in touch and let us know if we can help you with anything on your cases.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks. I enjoyed the experience.
Thanks. Take care.